Good morning, everyone. I hope the vocab quiz was to your liking. Hope you studied for that. Moving forward in our last and final section of Chapter 1, The Rise of Civilization, we're going to be taking a look at Mesopotamia. Within this section, we're going to look at the Fertile Crescent, city-states of ancient Mesopotamia, and last, we're going to look at the creativity of the Sumerians. We're going to talk about these things, and the guiding question that we're looking at today is, what role did the physical environment play in the development of Sumerian civilization? So today is going to be a little bit more of a geography lesson and how the environment affected the development of the Sumerian civilization. Here's our bell ringer. On the left, we have a piece of a story from the Story of Mankind by Hendrik von Loon, and he's going to talk about the area of Mesopotamia. I'm not going to read this whole entire thing to you, but while I'm reading this, I want you to look at the map on the right of Mesopotamia. There it is in the green, and if you know how to read a map, you understand that the blue is water, and there's a few rivers there. Let's look at the map while I read this to you. He's speaking about Mesopotamia. It is a valley situated between two rivers. It is the paradise of the Old Testament. It is the land of mystery and wonder, which the Greeks called Mesopotamia, the country between the rivers. The names of the two rivers are the Euphrates and the Tigris. That's very important to you to understand the two rivers are the Tigris and the Euphrates. They begin their course amidst the snows of the mountains of Armenia, where Noah's Ark found a resting place, and slowly they flow through the southern plain until they reach the muddy banks of the Persian Gulf. They perform a very useful service. They turn the arid regions of Western Asia into a fertile garden. So this is the area of Mesopotamia, geographically speaking. It has two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. They are not rapid rivers. They flow easily, making it easy to tame, to irrigate, and for agriculture. And on top of that, they outlet into the Mediterranean Sea. So what we're looking at in our bell ringer today is the following. Why do you think earlier civilizations started in Mesopotamia? As I've told you all along, there's one natural resource that we can't live without that we typically find civilizations settling around. So take a look at that question, pause the presentation, and I'll have an answer for you when you get back. Our question is, why do you think early civilizations started in Mesopotamia? Well, here's a possible answer. Well, there were two major rivers running through the region, and the Persian Gulf and the Mediterranean Sea were nearby as well. So you've got the Mediterranean Sea and the Persian Gulf that you can see towards the southeast of the map. The major rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates, provided waterways for travel and trade. The land in these river valleys proved fertile for farming. So it's the perfect place. There's waterways for trade where you can take your goods up and down the rivers. These rivers provide great irrigation. The land is very fertile, so farming is very easy there. It's obvious why they decided to settle in Mesopotamia. All right, let's look at the geography of the area of Mesopotamia. You should have your geography and history activity worksheet with you. Look along, read along as I read aloud. Among the things geographers study are human-environment interaction, or the interrelationship between people and their physical environment. Geographers examine the ways people use their environment, how and why they change it, and what consequences result from these changes. For example, humans altered the environment of the Fertile Crescent by introducing irrigation, thus enabling the development of Mesopotamia as a rich agricultural region. The Fertile Crescent extended in an arc from the Mediterranean Sea through what is now Israel, Lebanon, Jordan, Syria, and Iraq. The Nile Valley of Egypt is often considered to have been part of it as well. This arc is bordered by the Arabian Desert to the south and the Armenian Mountains to the north. Each tip of the crescent is in a river valley where frequent floods replenished the earth with alluvium, a mixture of sand, gravel, clay, and silt that adds to the fertility of the land. However, the agricultural demands increased as Mesopotamia's population grew. Farmers could not rely solely on the rains to maintain their crops, so they used the valleys of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers in the east and the Nile River in the west as a means for irrigating the land and achieving abundant agricultural returns in an otherwise dry climate. This abundance of food allowed the people of Mesopotamia to build cities throughout the region, making it a center of culture in Southwest Asia. At the bottom there we have a map of ancient Mesopotamia. Now on the next page, We want to answer these questions, understanding these concepts. You look at these questions, numbers 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 5. You will answer those questions on your own using the information in the worksheet. I will not be giving you the answers for this, as this is for a grade. You may pause the presentation now and work on your worksheet. Let's transition now to the actual city-states of ancient Mesopotamia. The first one we're going to be looking at is the city of Sumer. Our guiding question is, how did religious beliefs influence the organization of Sumerian society? So first we need to understand the religious beliefs. So Sumerian religion was polytheistic. Poly means many. Theo means God. So polytheistic, it involved a belief in many gods. They built temples atop large stepped towers called ziggurats. These were the most important buildings that they had. Temple priests and priestesses held a great deal of power, and kings were believed to derive their power from deities, making the government a theocracy. Human beings in general were considered inferior and were obliged to serve and obey the gods. So what we see is a very strong religious pull. The people who are actually in control, the kings and queens and priestess, they were believed to actually get their power from gods. And because they ruled with the power of the gods, it wasn't a democracy, but a theocracy, a God-driven government. So that is just a little bit of background of how important religion was to the Sumerians. Here we have a then and a now. The then is a artist rendering, a digital rendering of what the ziggurat at Ur would have looked like back then. On the right, obviously, is what it looks like in today's world. Now, ziggurats were very important to ancient Mesopotamians. It had a function as well as a form. The ziggurat supported the temple, which was the most prominent building. They placed it in the center of the city so that everybody would be equal distance from the temple. This indicates that religion dominated both the government and the economy. Now, what we see in these ziggurats look like early pyramids. As you see, they're stepped, so there's different tiers, there's steps leading up, but these later on, they start to become pyramids more and more over time. Now, further expounding on that, how did they set up their government and society based upon this religion? As Sumerian cities grew, they gained control over the surrounding countryside, and these became city-states. So a city-state is kind of a weird concept. You got to think of Knoxville as a city, Tennessee as a state. Tennessee has governance over all these smaller cities in the state. But look at it like Knoxville is its own entity to do its own business the way it sees fit, with no governance from the state of Tennessee. So it has state powers on a city size, on a city population size. So it's a city that has its own governance and is not associated or governed by a larger state. Sumerians had little stone or wood for building, so they relied on mud bricks. They invented the arch and the dome and built large brick buildings. Now later on, we're going to definitely see the Greeks expound and to reinvent the arch and the dome on a grander scale, but the Sumerians did it first. They invented the arch and the dome. Farming was the primary economic activity. Sumerians traded woolen textiles, pottery, dried fish, wheat, and metal goods for copper, tin, and timber. So these are just some of the aspects of the Sumerian religion, and this is the aspects of the government. Sumerian social structure consisted of nobles, commoners, and slaves. Nobles included members of the royalty and priests. Commoners were mostly farmers, and a few were craftspeople. Enslaved persons worked mainly for the royalty and temple priests and were used primarily for building projects, craft work, and farming. So this is where we see, this is how their social class is set up. Their social structure, you're going to have your nobility at the top. And we'll see this throughout history. Typically, nobility is going to be at the top. Your common people are going to be in the middle. And your slaves or craftspeople, trade people, they're going to be at the very bottom of the social structure. All right, now let's talk about the economy of Sumer. The economy obviously centered around agriculture first. City-states traded surplus crops to surrounding areas. Remember a few lectures ago, I made the analogy of if we were in the business of creating paper and other classrooms created pencils and erasers or pens, we would trade our surplus paper or crops to the surrounding classrooms or areas. Trade, they exported wool, barley, dried fish, wheat, metal goods, and they imported copper, tin, and timber. So these were things that they were going to need in Sumer that they couldn't get. They imported things that they didn't need, and they traded out, exported things that they had an excess or a surplus of. Industry, you had woolen textiles, pottery, and metal goods of copper, gold, silver, and bronze. Now, something that is very interesting, copper, gold, silver, and bronze all have some sort of numerical value in today's society, especially gold and silver. Well, for them, it had not yet become a commodity. No one had yet decided that gold was in short supply and to turn it into a form of currency. For them, it was just another metal. It was a metal that served a purpose. But we're going to see how that will change once currency becomes backed by gold itself. Let's take a look now at technology and innovations in Sumer. If you will flip to the back page of your geography and history activity that you did earlier in the lesson, you will see a graphic organizer on the back. It has spots for innovations. What is it? What was it used for in Sumer? And how did it change in society? Both of those innovations are bronze and cuneiform. So what we're looking for is what they are, what were they used for, and how it changed society. So let's look at bronze. I'm going to give you a few answers, and then you'll get the rest on your own. Look at bronze. What is it? It is a metal made of copper and tin mixed together. You may pause the presentation, rewind if you have to get that definition, but write that in. Looking across from bronze, if you'll go down to the end, how did it change society? It encouraged trade to acquire tin and to sell bronze metalwork. You may pause the presentation or rewind to get the answer to how bronze changed society. Now what I'm going to need you to do is to fill in the rest of the blanks. For bronze, what was it used for in Sumer? And for cuneiform, what is it? What was it used for, and how did it change society? Pause the presentation now and go ahead and knock those out. Now that last activity, the graphic organizer, was to help you answer this next question on the creativity of the Sumerians. Based on their achievements, why do we consider the Sumerians to be innovative? What were some of the things that they did, that they achieved, that would make us consider them to be innovative for their time? Well, they have great technological innovations. Cuneiform and clay tablets, a source of writing and keeping records. The importance of scribes. Why do you think scribes hold some of the most important positions in Samaria? Well, scribes were from wealthy families and were taught how to read and write cuneiform. This made them indispensable, and they eventually became leaders of their cities, temples, and of armies. So this writing cuneiform and the scribes, this is definitely a technological innovation of educating people in order to become leaders as they grew up in life. The functions of writing, and of course there were other Sumerian innovations such as the arch and the dome and the way that they built their homes. So the Sumerians were very, very creative. But again, this all goes back to a surplus of food sources, agriculture, systematic agriculture. There was no time during a nomadic lifestyle to be creative. All of your waking moments were concerned with survival. Now that you have a surplus of goods, you can go and you can be creative. You can do some extra things. And this is exactly what the Sumerians did. So that brings us to the end of chapter 1, lesson 3, Mesopotamia. And this is our review. How were the 6 basic characteristics of a civilization displayed by Sumer? Please remember, these 6 different characteristics of a civilization are very important for you. You must know those 6 characteristics of civilization. One characteristic is cities. The Sumerians learned to control the flow of the Tigris and Euphrates and grow regular crops, which allow people to live together in cities. Government. Independent city-states wielded political and economic control over the surrounding countryside. Religion. Sumerians' religion provided answers to questions about life and the universe. Their social structure. The economy was based on farming, barter, trade, and industry. The three major social groups were nobles, commoners, and slaves. They had a system of writing, where Sumerians created a cuneiform system of writing. And finally, art. Sumerians produced epic poems, fine metalwork, and elaborate architecture. So those are your characteristics of civilization. Those are the characteristics that Sumer, in particular, how they demonstrated those characteristics and show that they themselves were a civilization at that point in time. Now, please remember, this is the end of the chapter. There is not a vocabulary quiz during the next class meeting, but you still do have a guided reading activity that is due by midnight tonight. Don't forget that you also have your forum discussion questions that you must answer online on Moodle. You do have a test coming up. I will let you know what day your test will be on. And you still do have your glossary, your vocab glossary. If you have any questions that you need asked of me, please feel free to email me. Call me out in class. That's why we do these videos online, so that everyone can still progress, even if you have a question. So do not be afraid to raise your hand in class if you have a question. You have the online Q&A form that I always remind you about, that if you have a question, who knows, maybe 10 other people have the same question. And if one person posts that question, 10 other people have the same question asked. And as a group, a network of world history students, we can answer those questions if we come up with the correct answers. And if you do so, I may think about giving you a few extra points on a quiz or on a test, something like that, towards the end of the semester. As always, have a great time, study hard, and I'll see you at the next class session.